like I said, this talk came out of, I originally gave part of this talk at an Open Chain and Friends event in Stuttgart in March. And there was an OSPO track there, and we wanted to give an update on what our OSPO EG had been doing. So our OSPO Expert Group. So and then I was asked by the OSPO Expert Group to also give the talk here. So here we go. It's called the Last Mile Problem: Turning Executive Support into Real-World Open Source Contributions. And by the way, Claude generated that title for me. I think it was Claude. It might have been ChatGPT. One of them did. So, I just kept one introduction to AGL slide in this. For the other group, I had more introduction to AGL slides. But I think the most important thing is that we have all these members, these current, these automakers, these tier 1s, these technology companies. We have the UCB, we have SODEV, and so we are collaborating and in an open source project. But there's issues with that, and we've tried to, in the open source, in the OSPO Expert Group, tried to address some of those issues. We've proven over and over again now that competitors can collaborate on shared software. We're a neutral ground for OEMs and tier 1s working side by side on a common code and a common platform. And when I worked for a tier 1, I worked for Conti, I worked for Motorola. This never happened. We were vicious competitors who didn't even, we didn't even like to say each other's names. We hated each other so much. And when I was at Conti and Genevi was forming, and I was already shipping Linux products to Mercedes-Benz, my first question was, well, why would I want to collaborate with you guys? I'm way ahead of you. You guys they didn't even know what Git was. So that we've come a long way, and that was probably 15 years ago, 16 years ago. But we've had code contributions from automotive companies, including Toyota, Honda, Panasonic, Aishin, Denso, Jaguar Land Rover, Denso 10, companies don't even exist anymore, Mitsubishi, Daimler, and Subaru. And I think we've shown shared investment reduces duplication and accelerates innovation. And we have expert groups, of course, that are focused. They're enabling cross-company work, and we've got production-ready open source software in millions of vehicles. But of course, there's still issues. I'll tell you that over the years with AGL, there's been a lot of times where I say, I'm going to give you my favorite example, which is a telephony interface. I've said over and over again, hey, all of you tier 1s have a telephony interface for Linux. You've all done your own. I know you have, because I know that when I was at Continental, we did one, and we probably had 5 or 6 different telephony interfaces that we wrote, in the same RTOS for different companies. We didn't even share them between but in reality, there's no secret sauce there. It's a commodity. And a number of tier 1s over the years have volunteered to donate theirs, because I always said, hey, if you donate your API and your implementation, then you kind of get to help control this. And they would say, yeah, it was great. They recognized it was a commodity, and then they would go to their lawyers. And maybe 2 years later, we'd finally give up and say, we're not going to get the code. And I would say this has happened numerous times over the course of AGL. So how do we solve that? So the AGL OSPO Group was launched in 2024, led by Toyota, by Endo-san and Ito-san, who no longer, Ito-san, God rest his soul, he's now doing management stuff, and he's dead to us now, but it's okay. The goal was to encourage companies to establish their own OSPO and to share pain points and collaborate on solutions and develop best practices for open source in the automotive industry. And of course, address business restrictions like export control and antitrust. And of course, we originally were meeting bi-weekly, every other week. Now we're meeting monthly, and it's open to everyone. Anybody can join us. and that's a QR code that does work. I think I tested it, and meets monthly, and we're open to anybody who wants to join. That QR code will bring you to the Confluence page for the OSPO Expert Group. So the first thing that the OSPO Expert Group did was really recognize the need to have open source sponsored at the highest levels of your company. So, because without that, if it's just, a guy, just an engineer working on open source and they want to contribute something, they're probably, their manager is going to probably say, what's open source and why should we do that? Why are you wasting your time on that? So we created an executive slide deck. It's available for anyone to use. You can download the deck. It's available in, I think it's available in English and Japanese. And you can use slides from it. You can, use whatever you want from it. And it included case studies on OSPO usage for various automotive companies, including from Honda, Toyota, Bosch, and an unnamed Tier 1. In fact, it's so unnamed I can't remember who it was. So that that was good. So we have people who have actually used that now to try to promote open source to management at their companies. And we found many developers have concerns about contributing to open source projects. People are mean. They're not going to want to. They're really everybody in open source is mean. I've seen stories. My change is really small. No one wants it. Nobody cares. Or even if I have a change that I think somebody will care, well, how do I contribute a patch? So again, we created a presentation called Illusions and Truths of Participating in Open Source Software Communities. And that presentation is really targeted at developers. So you can use that, again, you can use that presentation, use parts of it, however you want to use it. It's freely licensed. And again, English and Japanese versions of that presentation are available. And then, we wanted to do a survey of automotive companies, people at automotive companies, and we want to know what barriers developers were encountering when they tried to contribute to open source. So we worked on this. We had 10 question areas. We created English, Japanese, and then Jalen helped us with a Chinese language version. We got 69 responses. 25 were in English, 37 in Japanese, and 8 were in Chinese. I'm not going to read all these, but I just put this in here for completeness. So basically, these were the questions that we developed, and they were around, do you feel like you've got the skills you need to contribute to open source? Do you have the knowledge? Do you have mentors at your company who can help you? Do you have cultural issues at your company that are preventing you from contributing to open source? Are there issues with management? So are there budget constraints? Things like that. And so here's this was the first set of results. Basically, we found that these are breaking down each of the questions by yes, no answers, and then the top one is the answers from the Japanese respondents, and the second row is the respondents from the rest of the world. Because we found that in looking at the data, in a lot of cases, the Japanese folks had a much different idea of what was happening, or a much more difficulty in certain things than folks in the rest of the world. Japanese respondents were, non-Japanese respondents were much more confident in their ability to contribute. Japanese respondents were much more likely to have language, skill, and company culture issues. And across the board, time and budget constraints. I'm working, 50 hours a week on my regular project. I don't have time, and management doesn't make time for me to contribute. Even if we're using this open source project on my project, and I find an issue, I don't have the time or the budget to go get that upstreamed, even though I know that getting this upstreamed is valuable. So And that was across the board. So finding number one. The number one, like I said already, the number one organizational barrier to open source contributions was basically lack of senior management buy-in. Leadership doesn't see the value, doesn't see the business value of contributing. Open source isn't seen as a strategic asset. There's concerns about, and this gets back to what I was talking about before, where there's really commodity things that everybody's doing, but for whatever reason, there's concerns about competitive advantage, that there's, you've written this code and I spent a lot of time on this code, but the reality is there's no competitive advantage to this code. Everybody's already done it, and it would be much better if we had some kind of, mutual way to develop and maintain that code. IP leakage concerns, I can't let this go because we have some special IP here. And so really what we found over, from our survey results and really anecdotally, without executive sponsorship, OSPO and contribution efforts stall. So we have seen, though, you've heard from some of our contributors the last couple of days where they're now, Kusakabe-san is now have an OSPO at Honda, Toyota with Endosan, et cetera. So developers are blocked from posting code to open repositories basically because of lack of senior management buy-in. Finding number two, this is the other important finding. Developers just generally don't know what to do. The most common response from we broke the data down, not just in the ways that you saw, but we asked questions of the respondents, who they worked for, whether it was a tier one, an OEM, a tier two, et cetera. The most common responses from tier ones and OEMs. We don't know what to do. We lack clarity on internal open source policies. There's no clear process for contributing code upstream. Or there's, the process for creating new open source projects from internal work, they're undefined or they're very complicated. Or I just don't know who to talk to. Maybe there's this great little piece of code that we've done that we want the world to see. I just don't know who to talk to get the approval to do this. And so the fear of legal or IP consequences also deters contribution. So what we see, and again, I hear this not just in this survey, but anecdotally, you got talented engineers who've written a lot of code that's, maybe it's improving existing code, maybe it's some new thing that they want to create a project for, but they just don't know how, and of course they're not going to risk losing their jobs over, the potential for IP leakage or being accused of such a thing. So what can we do? So the most important step, the majority of open source efforts die without executive sponsorship at automotive companies. Other industries recognize the value of open source. You see, in the server realm, telco, of course, anything involving networking. In CNC, in cloud native, you see these companies that are investing in major open source projects like Kubernetes. But it's just not. But the clear value of that contribution is not seen within automotive companies. So what to do? Establish an OSPO. Have a single place to go for managers and developers alike to know how to contribute and use open source code, and how to contribute to open source projects. And then create clear contribution guidelines that developers know how to follow. Have training on those guidelines. Educate management as well on open source and how it reduces cost and attracts talent. A lot of younger developers and even middle-aged developers don't want to work on some proprietary closed software thing. They want to engage with other people. They want to learn from the best who are out there in open source projects. So it's definitely a talent attractor as well. You can use AGL as a neutral, low risk space to start contributing. I think you'll find that we're pretty welcoming of people, And we're always, always welcome. You're always welcome to contribute code, help with documentation. We had one guy who participated for several years, just came to us out of the blue from the University of Nebraska, Omaha, and really did a lot of work on our documentation. Basically, and then he's taken that, what he learned there, and he's applied it to his other jobs in the future. And then share success stories across our OSPO Expert Group and industry gatherings. How did I convince, what are we doing in open source? What is my company doing in open source? And how did I enable, or how did my company enable me to go do that? And share that with other people. And then finally, we've talked some in the last few days about open chain. One of my concerns in creating our OSPO Expert Group was there's already a lot of great work being done by other Linux Foundation projects like OpenChain and the To-Do Group and some others around contributing to open source and collaboration and things like that. So leverage those projects, especially OpenChain standards, for compliance confidence. And yesterday, I think Mary showed us some of the work that they have done already in OpenChain for self-certifying and things like that on compliance. So this is my my last slide. As part of one of the things that fell out of this activity was we realized that some automotive companies, were not comfortable with talking to AGL about these things for whatever reason. And so we also then Endosign created an automotive working group monthly call called basically around automotive open source governance. So and I think that was referenced in his presentation yesterday. I really recommend that you join that call monthly. It rotates time zones every month, and you can join our OSPO Expert Group monthly call, and we'll update you on what's going on. And you can hopefully contribute success stories and tell us what your OSPO is doing. And maybe, we're trying to figure out what we should do next as an OSPO Expert Group. Maybe you have some ideas as to how we attract more companies to the OSPO Expert Group, whether it's European companies or American or Japanese. How do we get more automotive companies, OEMs and Tier 1s, contributing to open source? So thank you, and join the OSPO Expert Group. And are there any questions? Comments? Great thoughts? No? Okay. So that wraps up Jalen. Yes. It's still on the schedule, yes. So that wraps up the 2026 AGL Japan All-Member Meeting. We did it.